Verna Graffeld Fitzgerald is a well-respected patron of our library. She visits us frequently and participates in many activities. Thank you, Verna, for adding your story to the history of the library. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Kathy.
Then let's begin. To make your interview a little bit more realistic, I'd like to encourage you to be as descriptive as you can. That way we can listen to your story and we'll be able to visualize through your eyes. Think back to what the town was like and about what year are we talking when you take us on a visit to the original Secaucus Public Library.
We moved to Secaucus from New York in the early 1950s, and probably the first thing my parents did was get me a library card. I had had one, I think, since I was about 4 in New York. The library here, it seemed like the longest walk in the world to get there from where we lived. The
Where
old
was
town
that?
hall.
Where did
we
you
lived
live?
on 4th Street in what was called the New Houses. The first new construction in Secaucus, I think, since the Second World War. And it was in the old town hall, which was a beautiful building, beautiful, I don't know, turn of the last century maybe. The library, I remember, was up 2 flights of steps. I have an excellent memory, but I do not remember, and I've tried, the circular steps that some other people have mentioned. Just don't remember it. And I remember walking into the room, which was kind of small. I was from a library that was a large building on East 10th Street in Manhattan that had 2 floors, but it was big, and it was all library. This was a small room, but hundreds of books. I was thrilled. And then there was the door to the grown-up section, which we weren't allowed in. And of course I remember Mrs. Dudley, sweet lady, with her pencil, the magic pencil that had that little rubber thing on the bottom, and with tweezers you'd take out the day of the week or the date, and with tweezers you would place it and press it on the ink, and then carefully press it in the book on the slip that showed who had the book out. I wanted that pencil. Eventually I think they got one of those clicky
Stamper.
things, the stamper. No, I wanted that pencil. She could also write with it. It did all these wonderful things. And I remember eventually, I guess I was in the 8th grade, finished the 8th grade. I used to ask Mrs. Dudley, since I was a quick reader and had read everything I wanted, if I couldn't go into the adult section, and I don't remember what the age limit was, but I couldn't. When I finished the 8th grade, just before I went to Lincoln Junior High for the 9th grade, I told her that I was now a high school freshman and I should be allowed to take out books from the other section. And I guess she was so tired of me, she said, okay, go. And I got through that door, and it was a bigger room with more books. And I think there was an alcove, there was a big windowsill. I think you could sit on it while you leafed through a book. I don't remember what it overlooked. And the first book I took out from there was called For Love's Sake Only. Oh, doesn't that sound wonderful?
Yes.
I guess I was 13, whatever. Physically, the library and the town hall was on, I'm not going to say a park, but it was hilly. And the statue that's still there, the soldier statue, was there. And in the autumn, I remember it was a special treat after going to the library to roll down that hill. It wasn't very steep and it wasn't dangerous, but to just kind of roll down through the leaves. And I remember taking my little brother with me. And we have a picture of him, if I could only find it, with the statue, and we would roll down the leaves. Or if you met with your friends, you could sit down on a bench and read through the books that you just took out of the library. It was a special experience. It was a lot of fun. And I don't know, I sort of remember warmth. I don't know if that's because there was no air conditioning or steam heat in the winter. Just generally, you went there and you felt safe and happy.
That's beautiful. I want to go.
I'd like to go back.
And for the record, your little brother is our photographer,
I didn't
Fred
know if I should
Graffel.
say that.
But you did glance over at him lovingly,
did I?
so I will mention Fred.
Lovingly.
Well, that was beautiful. But what do you recall about the plaza area before the addition of the second library? And then what was that new library like to you?
The plaza area where the library was, I remember weeds, I guess that's the word, very high weeds. I was in the junior choir at the Reformed Church, and the Henkel family lived behind those weeds on First or Second Avenue, and they would have a picnic for the choir, and we would all go play in the weeds. We'd play Explorer, those of us that felt very daring, and we'd just kind of walk through it. Nobody ever expected that someday that would be a library, or even in any kind of use. The plaza at the time was very much like the plaza, the actual physical plaza is now, and there were block dances in the summer, and in the autumn occasionally there would be roller skating. Everything would be, cordoned off, and you could just roller skate around to music. It was in use. Mara's drugstore was there. Some of the stores are the same. But across from that was Weeds with a diner. And then somehow, suddenly, it was gone and construction started on this library, which was wonderful. It was a very good-looking building, and it had 2 floors, and I don't remember, I guess the fire engine, the firehouse was attached. I really don't remember that. There was a year, I don't know if it was the year of Secaucus's 100th or 200th anniversary, there was a calendar put out, and the library was on the front, and it was taken in autumn with leaves all covering it. It was just, the picture couldn't have been staged better. And it made it look like this is the ideal all-American town, which it kind of is or was. I always remember how beautiful that picture was. And skip ahead a number of years. I had been living in New York. I married. My husband and I moved back to New Jersey. And he would sometimes go to the quote-unquote new library with me. He couldn't get over that they played music. Mm-hmm. We were all brought up, no matter what generation or what kind of schooling, you're quiet in the library. And suddenly he walked in, and there's music playing, and there's people looking for books, and there's people chatting, and there's people, students looking things up. No computers in those days, but there was music playing in the background. That's one of the strongest memories.
I know that Mrs. Grazioli, the director at the time, was ahead of her time. She thought that the library should represent more of a community center atmosphere. So not only did she have the music, we served coffee if someone requested a cup of coffee, which I don't do in this library, much to the dismay of some people. But that was a beautiful Norman Rockwell setting.
Exactly.
That you're describing.
Exactly. That's just what it was. Out of a Norman Rockwell picture.
Right. And you mentioned to me that, I think it was you that went from the dark wood of one library to the lightness and the brightness of the other library. It was a little bit of a stark contrast. Did you feel that way as well?
Not really. Not really. It was dark wood, older in the old library, and everything was new and bright, and it was in keeping with the times, the lighter wood in I'll keep calling it the new library. Pretend this physical one didn't exist yet. It was just a totally different atmosphere. It wasn't closed in. Don't forget, in the old library, there were books, floor-to-ceiling books. And Mrs. Dudley's room, I don't think, had a window at all. So, of course, it was a little bit on the dark side. The other room only had the one window with the very wide windowsill. This was a newer building with windows and brighter lighting. It was a whole different atmosphere.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. And then by the time we left that library, we were loaded with shelves in the middle of the room, just as The first library, it got smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm.
As for the library that we're sitting in today, give me your idea of your first impressions.
What year was that? Did this open?
2003. And I gather people had one impression, and then it changes sometimes, and then they realize there's little nooks and crannies. So I'm curious to see what you, who were able to visit all three libraries, felt that maybe you lost or you gained.
Well, what wasn't lost, fortunately, was the card catalog box that Mrs. Dudley had.
Right.
Mrs. Dudley pops up a lot, I'm sure, in everybody's
She does.
memories, which is downstairs. I miss that. This library, everything is computerized. It's less personal. Has nothing to do with the people that work here. Just, you don't go up and say, oh, where would I find cooking books?
Right.
Or where would I find it? It's all computerized. You look it up, you find out, and you go. So I think that beautiful little oak cabinet, the card cabinet, is the one thing that links all three of the buildings. My first impressions of this building, of course, were how beautiful it is. How much thought and money seem to go into the sitting area, I guess you would call it. I like to come here with my husband. He, when we go out, has to use a wheelchair. And it's very comfortable for him to sit in one of those nice cushy chairs with a cup of coffee. I'm not sure he's supposed to have it, but he
Yes, he
enjoys
is,
it,
in the
even
reading
though
room.
the library isn't giving it. And sit and read, and we come to the movies and some different programs that are held. This is definitely a community center, as much as a library. I don't think people are taking as many books out because of Kindles and iReaders and whatever else it is. I don't know the proper names because I don't have any. I'm one of those people that likes to feel a book in my hands. But we were both very, very impressed. The lampshades, how beautiful they are. Just little areas of decoration. You can see nobody said, well, let's just give them good lighting and comfortable seats. Thought went into this. It's a very beautiful, beautiful building. It was, I'm sure, at the time, state of the art. I don't know if it still is because things advance daily practically. But I think pretty much anything that you would need is right here. And it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to come here and know that there is a tie with the old days. I wonder if any of the original books that were in the old library are still here, are still in circulation.
They may not be in circulation just because of the deterioration,
Yeah.
but there is an area downstairs where they keep some of the special books and some of the books that were autographed through the years or first editions that the library is not ready to let go of. So there is an area where we keep some of those
Are they on display?
fragile books. Not at the moment, they're not. There's, perhaps plans for that, and next year would certainly be an appropriate time as we celebrate the 80th anniversary of the library. So I'd be curious to see what's there, what's been accumulated, what's been preserved, and we'll see what we can do about that suggestion.
That would be really nice.
That would
That
be
would
very
be neat.
interesting.
Mhm.
That would be interesting. I know that you use it frequently, and I realize that you have someone in a wheelchair, which is something that we never had in the other libraries, was the handicapped accessibility. And that was important to you, and you even made suggestions at our pre-meeting here on certain ways that we could improve that. And that's something that this library is a work in progress. It'll never be finished. But hopefully with good people like you participating in some of our events and coming to our programming and appreciating books, libraries will never go out of business.
Oh, no, of course not.
No, there's too many
Absolutely
book
not.
lovers as we are.
Absolutely not.
We come to a little point in your interview now where I say it's your personal story time. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us so it would be included in your story in the history of the library. I know that you've participated in some of our quilting displays. I remember one particularly beautiful quilt that you had on display one year when I was the director that brought so much comment and people into the building that it was wonderful, and interest in quilting. Could you tell us a little bit about anything you want to add?
Well, I'm a member of the local quilt guild. There aren't a lot of us, but we're a nice bunch. We go out to dinner. We meet twice a month, and we do charity quilts. And once a year, we have a display at the library, and we all bring in 3 or 4 quilts, whether it's a work in progress or something that's already finished. And we display them, and we try and have people come up. We kind of spread the word a little bit that there is a free exhibit, and people can just come and look and leave comments if they like. And I think we've gotten 2 or 3 new members from women in town who have come and said, gee, I'd like to do that, or I do that, and they've joined us. So that's kind of fun. Anybody's welcome to join. I'll put a little plug in. You don't have to have experience. And I know there's a lot of other activities here. I've come once or twice to Project Linus meetings, which is very big. I know there's a very active group. They don't really do quilting, and I don't really do what they do, but on, I guess it's one Saturday a year, they have an open house where anybody can come in. And I'll come in and spend a few hours, and a lot of other people that are not members of Linus will come in and work on blankets or tie quilts or whatever it is. They don't have many quilts, otherwise I think more of us would come over for that. But we'll come and do whatever we can, devote a few hours. I know there are other organizations that meet here. There's also the local artists, where people that do any kinds of arts or crafts, painting, photography, whatever it is, bring their wares, I guess you could say. And for a few weeks they're on display. Individuals have displays, so there's a lot to bring people in. My husband and I will occasionally come to the Tuesday afternoon movies. That's always kind of fun to see what's going on and just see who's here, say hello to people, have a cup of coffee. Coffee seems to sneak in a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And just so many things to bring people in. Of course, I don't participate. We're a little too old, but I see all the things listed for children and teenagers. We didn't have that when I was a child. Secaucus really wasn't that child-friendly. There just wasn't much. And even the library, you went, you took your books out, and you went to the park, and that was it. The new library, again, at that period, I was living in New York for a number of years, so I don't know. I would assume they started to have more programs for
yes,
children.
they did. They had the room.
And the room downstairs with Mrs. McCormick. And there was more going on now. You go downstairs and it takes 5 minutes just to read all the notices when you walk in the door.
Well, that's fabulous.
Oh, and I also love when you come in, there's 2 exhibits on either side behind the glass cases. Always something interesting, whether it's somebody's collection of Girl Scout memorabilia or postcards or dolls or trips to South America. There's always something to look at. I don't think the library is ever going to die out. I don't care how many Kindles or how many devices there are. People are still going to want books. Babies will still get books. Little children. Yes, now they're learning to use these devices younger and younger. But they still, we had a 3-year-old in our apartment last week, and I had some books that I took from the library in my building. I'm in a co-op. You have books you don't want, you put them down there. You see some you want, you take them. Nobody checks you. It's always full. A lot of children in the building, and their mothers will put very gently used books down there that their children no longer want. So I took 3 or 4. And this little 3-year-old Justin was looking around what he could play with, what he could touch. I have a lot of stuff in my house. And I gave him books. That kid sat down, started opening One of them had sound effects, including a Dracula that had a maniacal laugh. Well, he couldn't get enough of that Dracula page. So little children still want books. It's still going to be something that's very important in people's lives. I don't care how far in the future you go.
Statistics prove that children who've been read to and learned to read at an early age do so much better in their higher education. So I agree with you that that's never going to change. Kindles, they'll be there or they'll be replaced by something else. In fact, this library now loans out Kindles that are fully loaded. But I think that's more for the traveling person, someone who
There's a
cannot
place
pick
for
the
them.
book.
There's a place for them.
Right.
Somebody sitting on a plane, yeah, it's a lot easier to have 4 books in a magazine in one small, compact
Right.
device than to go fumbling for books and things. So there is a place for them. With the charge of fees from the airlines. What weighs more, 3 books or a Kindle? So you're going to save a little money and save a lot of space. There's a place for them, definitely. I can't say I'll never get one,
Right.
but I'll sure never give up books.
Never give up books.
Never give up going to the library.
As I'm watching you, I'm looking at all the art books, not all of them in the library, but some of them, and I think I want to just sit and pull them out one by one again, and go through them as I had time. So that will never happen. I want to thank you, Verna, for giving us this insight into your piece of history of the Secaucus Library. And I know that people will enjoy this for years to come.
Thanks, Kathy.
I thank you. You feel it. I can actually feel your
Yeah.
love of books and libraries generating from you to me.
Yeah, that's sincere. It is, and I think this is really a fun thing. It's kind of exciting to be a tiny moment in the history of the Secaucus Library. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you for coming. You're always a welcome visitor.